All right, let's dive in studio. Joe Musso alongside the two-time champ Bryant McFadden. Knows what it takes to get there, knows what it takes to win a couple, and it took an outstanding effort here to go on the road and win in Buffalo, as it always does. Take me to where it started. How were the Cincinnati Bengals able to put together a game plan that was so convincingly dominant in this spot?
I mean, when you look at the first two drives for the Cincinnati Bengals, that was basically the telling story for what we would watch throughout the entirety of this ball game. Two outstanding drives, went the length of the football field, basically putting 7 points on the scoreboard to get up to a nice 14-point lead, and they just dominated the ball game in the trenches. Remember, coming into this ball game in regards to questions or concerns with the Cincinnati Bengals, no Kappa, no Williams, no problem. The offensive linemen did a phenomenal job just not protecting their star quarterback in Joe Burrow. But look at the ground and pound attack for the Cincinnati Bengals. When you look at the game in regards to numbers, Joe Mixon, 105 yards on the ground, averaged over 5 yards per carry. In totality as a team, Joe, they rushed for 172 yards on the ground. An offensive line unit that were dealing with injuries. We saw how bad they performed last week against the Baltimore Ravens, right? Looking at this matchup, knowing they will once again be on the road in a playoff atmosphere, needed to really do a great job in protecting their quarterback and establishing the game within the game in the trenches. They did a great job, and that was the telling story for me when you look at how productive Cincinnati was. It's all starts and stops with the offensive line unit.
A big tip of the cap to that unit up front, piecemealed once again, as they were a week ago and a year ago, in fact. And as you take a look at the Bengals, they were assertive in that run game, also allowed just one sack.
One sack.
And it was a sack that was off script. Burrow could have gotten rid of that ball. They kept their guy clean in most junctures of this game. B-Mac, talk to me about Buffalo in this spot. All the emotion coming into it. Obviously, we had the scenes with Damar Hamlin pregame and during the game. They had their guy back in the building, but just unable to execute from the get-go. Where were things made hard on them?
Just in the trenches on both sides of the football. They were too soft at the point of attack. You know what I mean? When you look at what was going on or going wrong with the Cincinnati Bengals coming into this matchup, you would have thought Buffalo would be able to exploit some of those matchups in their favor. Defensively, did not rush the passer well at all. You talked about the one sack that we saw from Buffalo, and that was solely basically on Joe Burrow. Then defensively, for them, outside of not being able to rush the passer, couldn't stop the ground and pound attack. And then when you transition to Josh Allen on the offensive side of things, they could not run the football at all. Once again, he was their lead catalyst in regards to that area. He could never get into a rhythm because defensively, they dominated the guys in the trenches. They put pressure on Josh Allen from different ways, exotic type blitzes, and then you look at the four-man front. They did a great job in collapsing the pocket as well. So this was just a total dominant performance coming from Cincinnati on both sides of the football field when you look at their guys in the trenches.
When you look at the Bills this season, and the questions of what if are obviously going to float around here for another offseason because so much is expected when you have a quarterback the caliber of Josh Allen. But you talked about the run game. They were unable to execute in the run game, but they weren't willing to run the ball throughout the entire season.
That has been an issue for them. Yes.
Can you expect a team in this moment when you need to run the football to just flip that switch?
No, because they're not accustomed to doing so. One thing about playoff football, if you want to have a deep run in the playoffs, if you can find a way to set the tone in the trenches, you will find a way to win ball games. Look at the two games we watched yesterday, right? Kansas City, Isaiah Pacheco, offensively was a big-time hero for the Chiefs based on the absence of Pat Mahomes. Look at the Saturday night ball game. The Eagles dominated in the trenches. Look at what we just witnessed earlier today. Cincinnati dominated in the trenches. That has been the issue for Buffalo. I understand you got a superior-like talent at the quarterback position, but Joe, just think about how great Josh Allen could really be if he had a reliable rushing attack to rely on from time to time. That's the issue. They come into a ball game, they become one-dimensional by force. They force themselves to be one-dimensional. Usually when you see offenses devote more attention to the aerial attack or running the football, it's usually because the defense is forcing them to do so. Buffalo just comes into a ball game and say, you know what, we're going to run here or there. We're going to put the football in Josh Allen's hands and allow him to bail us out. But when you're talking about playoff football, good against good, you're going to need more than your star quarterback, and that has been an issue for them the entire season. And guess what? In the playoffs, those issues will catch up to you, and they will prevent you from advancing.
Of those 60-something rushing yards for the Bills, 26 of them belong to Allen. So you can make the case that that rushing attack is even weaker than it looks right now. It's something they obviously need to clean up in the offseason. The offseason doesn't start for at least another week here for these Cincinnati Bengals as we will run back the AFC title game from a year ago in KC. It was an overtime winner then for the Cincinnati Bengals. They'll look to get this one done in the standard 60. Before we go forward, I do want to talk about Joe Burrow in this moment in Buffalo, getting the job done for his team. What about him, whether it be in his character or in his ability, makes him so dangerous, so confident in these types of moments?
He's so cool. He's so cool. You know, when you look at growing up for me watching basketball, the Iceman was one of my favorite players, George Gervin, because he was just so smooth and so cool. That's who Joe Burrow is on the gridiron. He's always relaxed. Even when he walks into the stadium, he walks in with no sense of urgency. Like, he's just so mellow and just so smooth and cool and laid back. And you see the same persona from him on the football field. And I knew Joe was going to have a cool game when I watched the first drive. It was like, man, even though they were kind of bringing different looks at him, he was always relaxed. He was just as comfortable as a baby in a car seat. And you know you better make sure your baby is comfortable in that car seat because you want to have a smooth ride. That's what we saw from Joe Burrow. He has that it factor. 23 of 36, 242, 2 passing touchdowns. He should have had a third, but Jamar Chase wasn't able to hold on to that football, but that was an outstanding, prolific-like pass. Man, Joe Burrow just has that it factor. If you want to neutralize their offense, you got to make sure he's not cool, because when he's cool, when he's in his bag, he's going to be productive.
You got to sack him more than 2 times. The numbers show it. You do not beat him if you don't do that. The Chiefs will look to get Burrow off his spot, a place where he's comfortable on the road, goes to Orchard Park, now going back to KC to try and do what he did a year ago and walk out of there with a W and go to a second consecutive Super Bowl. How do you like that matchup, Mac? The early look line giving a little advantage here to KC at home, but Joe Cool flinches in the eyes of no man. It's 2, like you like to say, prolific quarterbacks in the biggest moment. You get to the title game, and it's good on good. Who do you give the edge?
Right now, I don't know the health status of Pat Mahomes. I mean, when Pat Mahomes is healthy, especially what we saw yesterday against the Jacksonville Jaguars, he's the best in the game. He's the best in the world. But one thing about these Bengals, they're not afraid of Kansas City. They just went there earlier in the year and took care of business against Kansas City in Arrowhead. So they're extremely familiar with that atmosphere. They're not afraid of it. So who I would give the early edge to, I got to go with the Joe Cool.
Okay.
Right? Because he's healthy. His team is surging. They've had a lot of success.
That run game.
Exactly. They've had a lot of success against Kansas City. So I got to give the edge to Joe Cool right now. And if they can run the football like they did today against Buffalo, there's no slowing them down at all.
You shrink that game, you limit the time that Pat Mahomes is on the field, and good things start to happen. We do have to close the book on what was an up and down, emotional at many times season here for Buffalo Bills and their fans. Natural disaster, on-field disaster, playing games outside of their home stadium in Detroit. A lot happened. How are you going to remember this season for the Bills? And if you were to give just one note to this team moving forward to finally get over that ceiling that they've seemed to set for themselves here in the divisional round, what would that be?
Okay, first question, a disappointment in regards to how the season ended.
Preseason Super Bowl favorites.
Hands down by almost everybody. Talented team on both sides of the football. Throughout the course of this season was considered one of the best teams in the AFC. To lose at home to Cincinnati, a team that basically only had 2 legit starters from the opening day roster that was on the offensive line in the beginning of the season, and then this ball game basically only having 2 of those guys in, and you lose in the fashion in which you lost, disappointment. Now, moving forward, they got to get tougher, Joe. They're too soft at the point of attack on both sides of the football field. Let's highlight the Philadelphia Eagles, right? When they were dealing with the issues in stopping opposing offenses, rushing the attack, what did they do? They brought in Joseph. They brought in Sue, right? 2 guys that are experienced that can really do damage in the interior of their defense. And look, It has been extremely productive. Buffalo, they need to get tougher in the front, defensively, in the interior. And at some point in time, you got to find a guy who can be your featured running back and rely on that guy when Josh Allen needs to take some pressure off his plate. Until then, they will always get to a point where they can dominate their division, to say the least, have a nice potential playoff run, and it will come to an end when they play against teams that have more balance. Look at some of the best teams in the game right now, the Eagles. Balance, right? San Francisco with their third-string quarterback, balance. When you have balance, as a defender, we can't predetermine what we will see because either or can really hurt you in regards to success. That's the issue for the Buffalo Bills. They got dominant. They got dominated by Cincinnati. If you go back to last week against a third-string quarterback, only a 3-point win at home. Last week was a telling sign of what we potentially could see against a better team that was healthier and had star power at the quarterback position, and it became a reality today.
Throughout the season, it was the turnovers that put the Bills in a position that they did not want to be. Close games when they shouldn't have been. That was not the case. Pure domination here by Cincinnati on Sunday. B-Mac, thank you.
Yes, sir.
Taking a look now at what happens when we run it back. Back-to-back meetings in a conference title game since 1970. We're going to get the Bengals and the Chiefs for the second consecutive year as they stamp themselves as the gold standard in the AFC currently. And for the second consecutive season, it's the Bills' season coming to an end in the divisional round.
Do you want a sports network that delivers everything that matters about the game? The highlights, the picks, the instant analysis, no yelling, no fake debates, no politics. Hit the subscribe button and never miss a moment.